Good morning, everyone. I'm super excited about this morning's panel discussion. We have some amazing people who are going to help us deep dive into more advanced topics in restorative justice and how to manifest them. I'm Shailly. I'm here today because we started this training, Erica, in the beginning of the week by honoring John Lewis, and we played a video of John Lewis's life in his own words that the Washington Post had compiled, and it was really quite beautiful and moving. But one of the things that I think I wanted to invoke in his memory as an elder for all of us was the idea of giving it your all, like find what it is and give it your all and don't give up. And I said on Monday morning, and I'm going to repeat now, that I feel like restorative justice has been that thing for me, the one idea that I could give my all to since I understood what its potential has been. So I've been giving it my all, and I want to continue to give it all. So that's why I'm here today. Charles, do you want to go? I just want to give Erica a minute to get to know us a little bit.
Yeah, restorative justice to me and why I'm here. Well, number one, I'm here because I started with environmental justice and the whole idea of we need to save this planet because backstory, I was a Boy Scout since second grade all the way up to even after high school, like my freshman year in college. I finally got my ceremony and yada, yada, yada. But the main point is when I first went camping, the rivers and the lakes in California were wide, very wide. And by the time I left Boy Scouts, there's little streams and little passages of water, not even a river Boy Scouts can swim in. And that affected me because I realized that people and future generations won't be able to enjoy the experience I had. So coming from there, I then got into social justice because I realized that environmental justice and social justice are one and the same. It's a similar struggle. So coming to the understanding that justice in this world has died, I have to find a way to restore it. And that's why I'm here, to be a student of restorative justice, be a student of Shailly, and to learn new ways to bring about change.
And to be a leader, I would
And to
say.
be a leader, courageous. I'll pass it on to Deirdre.
Good morning, everyone. So a lot of y'all might know already that I work as a social worker in New York, and a lot of the people that I've worked with are young folks who are justice involved in the juvenile courts. And for me, it has been, I stumbled upon this work. I've always wanted to work with adolescents. I didn't know in what capacity. And my first job out of grad school was in a in-home short-term substance abuse treatment program where I did family therapy. And it was very unique, and there were none of its kind. And I learned so much about the world and the things that I wasn't aware of. I didn't know much about the justice system at all before coming into this work. And I started to work with a lot of young people who were talking to me about their experiences. And the common thread that I constantly was seeing was that there was a disproportionate minority contact in this system. And I didn't really understand why some neighborhoods were being over-policed and some weren't. I then transitioned over to working for a legal organization in New York, and I had a lot of questions about the work and the practices that we had, and couldn't understand why we were continuing to do that, even though we were constantly having conversations about disproportionate minority representation inside the courtrooms. And I would see, coworkers looking at non-Black and brown youth who came into the courtrooms. They would see white clients come in every once in a while. I think I've had like 2 clients in my entire caseload altogether. And they've always been given what I call a golden ticket, an ACD, an adjournment and contemplation of dismissal. And in 6 months, they got a slap on the wrist. They were monitored by, the courts. And even that wasn't really a monitor. And then they were head on their way. And I called it a golden ticket because I rarely saw it being given, and it was freely given to them. And, you know, because they had a drug problem, it's not their fault. When I would see like a Black or brown youth with the same issue, and they would be in court for at least a year before their case was resolved. So I never really fully understood that. And I really struggled with that. And my way forward was to really look for alternatives. And then I stumbled upon TRC, and I've been here ever since. And I'm not going anywhere.
Good morning, everyone. I'm gonna center myself had a little technological difficulty, but this is that world we're in right now. But I'm here, and I'm glad to be here. I'm a law professor. I've been teaching over a decade. I've been teaching specifically race and law and race, some rendition of it. That is my passion. That's where my scholarship lies, in critical race theory and critical race feminist theory. I was interested in this space of trying to convey that there has to be another way. And I had been aware of restorative justice, so I really appreciated when you gave us the various understandings of restorative justice. Now I have a better understanding of this restorative justice. And I don't even have enough words to express how it is going to help me fill a gap that I have noticed over the years. That gap of trying to get the listener to feel what I'm saying. Because just saying, you need to live in someone else's experiences, or the words we use are lived experiences. If that party or person or individual has not actually lived in that experience, how to get there, how to convey it. And this experience, this training has helped me to know that I have to offer this as a recommendation. I have to offer this as a recommendation. And I am currently writing a law review article on online teaching law and racism. Because of society's unrest, there is a panic amongst legal education. And how do we get this out? How do we talk to people? And since I've been doing it, and I said, I know. And I just want to say thank you, because I'm going to add restorative justice as a model for recommendation.
Hi, Erica.
Hello, good morning. So I am a school leader. I'm a principal of an elementary school, public school. And I've worked in the New York City public schools for the last 2 decades. And my call to restorative justice, what has brought me to restorative justice, I would say, I think that I didn't realize that it was alive in my world, my classroom, at the time that it was alive. I didn't have the language. I was doing restorative practices, but didn't really have the language. And it was when someone started to talk about restorative justice that I realized, oh, that's what that thing is called. And one significant part of this work is this idea of community and the role of power. Those two things are what keep pulling me back to restorative justice and the practices that are around it. Because as a teacher, it was really critical for me to build community in my classroom. And in order for students to own that space, the power dynamic had to shift. And so there was the importance of understanding how do you bring voices into a space where there is a clear structure that exists, but how do you work within a power structure without there being uneven power? So those were questions that I began to ask as a classroom teacher. So as I have grew to understand, more about the, school to prison pipeline and all that is happening, all the injustices in our world, it pushed me to become a school leader. I never wanted to be a principal. It is an extremely hard job, but I was called. I was pulled there and knew that in order to fully understand the role of community and power inside of the larger school system, I needed to understand it at the building leader level. And so that call to understand how do you bring a community together with children and adults, how do you allow for all of these voices to exist, how do you understand when your community is broken, and how do you heal? And those were all things that pulled me into the role of being a school leader and understanding the significance of restorative justice in schools as it is in connection to the larger society.
And so, Erica, you got this position right when things started, like the beginning of this year, right? Or yes?
Yeah. So I just finished my first year as a principal.
What a year! So I think when we spoke last time privately, you shared with me some of the restorative justice practices that you actually, in the way that we articulate them, or circle work, with your community of people working in the school even before school started. Do you want to just share some of the journeys you've had this year with this practice in the school system? Because I think it was fascinating for me to hear about. Yeah.
So I joined a school community as a stranger, as an outsider, and I joined a very tight-knit, close school community, a school in which generations of families moved through the school, whether as, the mother was a teacher and then the daughter became a teacher, or just generations, the grandmother went to school there and her grandchild is going to school there. So I was the outsider, I was the stranger, and if I go back to this power piece, I knew that I was entering into a community that collectively had more power than I did because they were already a community, but I was the leader, so structurally I had the power. And I knew that in order to lead this school community, that we had to build community and understand each other as a new community. So my very first day, my the opening moment, my first time meeting my staff was through a circle. And I have a very large staff, so there were about 80 people that I needed to gather. And, I toyed with, oh my goodness, how do you do a circle with so many people? And, but it felt really important that we all were in the same space at the same time having a shared experience, because we needed to have a shared experience in order to begin to connect as a community. So, I am grateful for the TRC models because it helped me to think about the 4 phases. And so when thinking about how do we bring ourselves into the circle, that I am here, part of the circle, I knew that we couldn't have 80 people talk at the same time. And so I had to make some adjustments in how do we bring our voices in. And so the prompt for that particular circle was who do you bring to school with you each day, and write that person's name on a circle, a little card circle, and place it into our physical circle, our altar. And people read the name of the person and they placed them into the circle. And what began to happen is that some individuals shared a little story about that person. And I later came to learn that the only people that spoke beyond saying the person's name, who shared a little circle, were people who never talk in this community. These were individuals that generally are silent, and all the other people do the talking. And so that sort of, when I heard that, I was like, oh, okay, I wouldn't have known that because I was new to the community. The other thing that happened was it was very important to me that all the individuals in the school were part of the circle. Normally, the school year began where it was just the teachers, the pedagogues were there, but it was important that school safety was there, that the food services was there, that the custodial staff was there. And so one other thing that I began to hear is, wow, I've never talked to certain individuals in this community. So creating that large, huge circle was very, very important. And I began to understand its significance only after we had gathered. And some of the planning was just, how do you not turn it into, you know, a 3 and 4 hour circle with so many individuals. And so some of the adjustments were just, how do you put your voice into the circle? So writing was one of those. And then doing some sort of concentric circle kind of things inside of the circle to get stories out into the circle. And that structure became, it was how I felt I needed to introduce myself to the community. I needed to say, so here's how I want to show up in this school community. I want to show up collectively where there is, where all of our voices matter. And I saw that as we were moving through the school year and we hit the pandemic, we came back to that first day circle, and we gathered as in virtual circles so many times in March, April, May, and June. And that the community understood that that was the structure that we have to have in order to work through things, to connect with each other. And so it was scary to do a big circle, but it was such a critical and significant action that I took on that first day.
Thank you. I'm sure people would love to continue this discussion with you about it, but I just want to ask one more question, and you can even pause for a minute and we can come back to it. But I'm wondering if you want to talk about, besides the pandemic, issues of race relations in the community that may have arisen recently, and how you navigated that in the process of having a community circle within the group and also with parents and community members.
So one significant thing is the predictability. So the predictability of the circle, the physical circle that you're going around and you kind of see when your opportunity to share or not share is coming, and having the circles be a regular part of the community. So we had been having regular Friday 1 o'clock community gatherings, and they weren't always about problems and solving things. They were initially really about coming together. So then as the world was exploding, our June circles really shifted, and they focused on race and all that was happening in the world. So the conversations about race and equity are a huge part of the school community. So it wasn't new to the school community. So that's significant. It wasn't the first time we were having race conversations. This is a school that's been leading these conversations for a number of years. But what the circle structure provided was a safe space to share. And what was happening, once again, voices that normally do not speak were being heard. So we would gather at 1 and you know, thinking carefully about the kinds of prompts and you know what, where to place those prompts. That part I had to think very carefully about. But once, you know, sort of the structure was there and the circle began, the voices of really the staff, the Black males in my school building and the Black women in my school building were being heard in a very different way than they had been. In some cases, it was the first time some of the stories were coming out into the larger community and were having an impact on the community at large, and not knowing certain things, certain stories that existed in our community. And so the circle work created, it created space for people to work through whatever it is they needed to work through on a personal level. And then, and it began to drive where we were going as a community about our learning. So we spent our summer learning together, and that came out of the circle work. We decided that we needed to come together to learn through looking at using things like Netflix parties and having discussions about 13th and various documentaries. So so that was where those conversations really started to come out.
Thank you. So for the new people that are just learning our model, what Erica's really talking about is using the circle model that we've sort of reviewed this week and experienced this week as a structural component of your place, so that it's not called only if there is a conflict, but actually to truly build community. So when issues arise in the community, we've already developed the limbs to navigate it in a useful way, right?
Exactly.
Is that so?
Yeah.
So that's like real leadership, like already having this space in place for people, and very brave of you, Erica, to be a principal and the first thing you do is run a circle for 90 people. I can't imagine what you did to ground yourself before that experience. We spent yesterday talking about self-care and what we have to really do, because it is terrifying. I think you would admit that showing up in a new community and the first thing I'm going to do is run a circle, which is a place of vulnerability, and you don't know whether people are going to laugh at you or participate. I mean, that would be me, but I don't know what was going on in your mind, but it's a courageous act in some ways to actually have the conviction in the process to go ahead and do it.
And it's key to trust the process, trust the circle. There was putting an altar in the middle of a school gym. It's not what normally happens. And I toyed with, do I not? And you have to show up as your authentic self, and trust the process.
Charles, thank you. So Charles, I was just going to go back to a conversation that you and I had when you were first starting to work with TRC as a volunteer to assist with this training and beyond. And one of your professors said to you, well, how can we possibly use this? Like, can you just sort of describe that conversation? And if you have an answer to that at this point.
Yeah, so my organization, the SU 771 Alliance, had an informational to promote this course. And a professor from my university posed the question, how are you going to go from restorative justice into transformative justice? How are you going to apply this, actually? And I think it's more so, to answer it now, it's really not about how you're going to apply it, how are you going to go from A to B. It's more so just doing it. Like how Erica just did with 90 people, 80 people in a circle. It's really just about getting over that fear of, is this going to blow up in my face, or is this going to actually work? And like Erica said, coming with our authentic selves, coming with who we are, which is justice seekers, and just doing it. I don't really think there's a method or a hypothesis, step-by-step way of going from restorative to transformative. You just have to do it. Like, not to get all wisdomy, but like a caterpillar going into his cocoon, coming out as a butterfly. It's just doing it. It's just, you got to do it. Like life, just live it.
Somehow it feels like an act of courage when you're wrestling with, for me, it's an act of courage to go ahead and believe what I believe and actually do it. And, this is always my primal fear, is like, I'm going to set up a space and no one's going to show up, and I'll feel like a fool. And that's that whole shadow work that Deirdre explained to us so powerfully, because it has to be part of this work. Because if we don't address it, we will not have the circle. Like the reason we spent that whole day talking about shadow work is we know that the main obstacle to this work is the the demons that will come out to dance on our head when we're trying to create a circle. Like, don't do it. It's going to make you look stupid. No one's going to show up. They're going to laugh at you. And if we don't address it, I think the work gets stopped. Like, do you agree, Erica? Is that sort of?
Yes, absolutely. The amount of I actually have a reminder that comes up periodically, do your shadow work. Like, I just keep reminding myself to do it, because in order to hold the space and not get in the way of the work, you've got to do the pre-work.
Right. Something.
Oh, yes.
I was thinking, and thank you so much for sharing, both Charles and Erica. Charles, to your point about how we frame things, sometimes the framing to the professor becomes so daunting that we refuse to wrap our head around the goal. To be able to say, how do you, or to articulate, how do you go from restorative justice to transformative justice? They're like blocks in an individual's head, framing. But the reality is, restorative justice is transforming. Okay, so what I'm learning to do, and it takes time, is to not respond to the question, or to the not respond to the question as posed to me, but to restate it in a way that I can further articulate what my position is. So for that professor, for that university professor to question the title restorative justice, because that particular professor has bought into, subscribed to transformative justice, is labels, right? But if the goal is to transform the people that you're trying to impact, what matters what you call it? But if you could articulate the goal, there's a restorative justice model that is transforming. And it's transforming when we meet what we know justice should look like. And what we have talked about as justice is not justice. Erica, you said that you were doing this thing and didn't have a name for it. I think that's when you know what it feels like when the name appears, or when the label appears, or when the model appears. And then you just, it's a synergy with what you know to do, to what this notebook, I'm looking down because I'm looking at your restorative justice notebook. So I didn't take the time to put it in a notebook, but I know it's the right thing to do intuitively. And so then if I have buy-in, then it's a way to get to my goal. So I was just thinking about that, because when I was a co-facilitator, I'm going to use the labels. When I was a co-facilitator at UCF College of Medicine with an intentionally designed curriculum to have small group sessions with medical students, we didn't sit in a circle. We sat at an oblong table, but the groups were designed intentionally to be small and intimate, and we had prompts. The two co-facilitators had prompts as to where we wanted them to go and what we wanted to get from this lesson. And the lesson had some issues such as cultural awareness, implicit bias, professionalism, and those topics that perhaps the voices would not have been heard in a large group setting. So in my mind now, I think about it, that was a circle. That was a circle designed for individuals to be heard that didn't generally talk or to be called upon, and it was called a small group session. So I'm just thinking about how this practical application becomes so intentional when you have the knowledge base, and the knowledge base that we've been exposed to is this restorative justice model.
Deirdre, do you want to add stuff? Because I know it must have been music to your ears to hear Erica every day ask herself to do shadow work.
I love it. I've been doing a lot of shadow work, more than usual this week during COVID, and I love it. But it just makes us better in the work that we do. I was actually just talking with my staff about some things that were coming up, like some what we social workers refer to as countertransference. When you work with an individual and they trigger something within you that is really at your core of something that you need to work on. And what I've learned from a previous teacher is that everyone who walks through the door that triggers you in some sort of way is an untapped, unhealed part of yourself that you need to work on. So
and some people would say that they are your teachers.
Yes, they are your teachers. They are your teachers because they're putting up a mirror to all the things that you don't want to look at. And that is something, because there's so many different people that come into a circle, so many different people that come to the space. Like we said, we all have our baggage, and mine's over there somewhere. And I sometimes pretend that they don't exist. But we have to look at them if we're going to do this work, because we have to be intentional about it. And so I was listening to Erica in awe, because for the last year and a half, I just became a new manager at my job. And I'm just sitting there like, damn, I should have done a circle. Because I'm having such challenges, and I'm like, if I did a circle from the beginning, I did a circle some point, but I never stuck to it. And I think that was my own shadow. Like, my shadow is more like, am I good enough? Can I handle it? Can I do it on my own? And so I did shy away from that. So when I'm listening to Erica and her bravery in addressing what she needed to really impact some real change, like, it takes courage to do this work. It takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot, and I don't know about you, Erica, but it took a lot of tears. A lot of tears, and to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, and to also be uncomfortable with the I don't knows, because we don't always know the answer. And once we can change that big I to a little I, it shifts everything.
Deirdre, when you were doing your dissertation, one of the things you said, and I felt like this was TRC talk, is the professors were asking you for answers to profound questions in today's world. And what I loved is when you said, I don't have to have all the answers, but I know how to get there. And I thought that was like how to get the group there. And I think that's the whole core. Like, we're not coming into the world saying, we have all the answers to today's racism, institutional racism, personal racism, institutional decay, corruption. We're not saying we have all the answers, but we do know that together, we all have the answers. Like, together, we can all get there. And that's and so it was great to hear you say that to your professors during a dissertation.
I think they've been so used to me in the last year, because I've had conversations with them almost on a weekly basis, and these are the conversations we've been having back and forth. And I'm grateful that my entire committee was Black, which is pretty unheard of. Even in today's day, and we were able to have some really profound
at NYU,
yeah, some really enriching and profound conversations about what I wanted to bring to academia, and really where my heartbreak was. And I think that's my heartbreak was why it was so difficult to write my papers. And they were able to really help me to guide myself through a lot of those shadows, and a lot of like, how do I need to, like, I can't just drop people in the depths of their darkness. I have to bring them out into the light as well. And so trying to reimagine what that would look like, because a lot of times when you read articles, it's always like, these are the solutions we have to have. And I was always stuck with that. And I really struggled to write my papers, because I was like, how am I the person to give you the answers? And I had a lot of that imposter syndrome. And I had to think about what was important to me about getting to the other side, and how do I convey that in a way that it's not all the answers, but this is a solution that could be helpful. These are some things that we could look at, and these are things that we have to talk about.
Absolutely.
And if we don't talk about it, we're just gonna go right back to where we are. We're not gonna go anywhere.
Brian, I wanted to get you into the conversation. If you could just, I know they know you really well now, but if you could just introduce how you came to restorative justice and what the vision for it is in your mind.
Well, the way I came to the restorative justice was what Shailly said earlier in this training, where she and Mr. Price came up with, they decided to find a way for TRC to be able to train teens during spring break one year. So I did that during my freshman year at high school. And then ever since, well, in the beginning, I was a little skeptical on it, just because of the way it was. But like, I still enjoyed the process. And then I just can't. By the end of the training, I just really loved it. And I just wanted to continue it. And so since then, I've just been with TRC, and just continuing the work with them. And what was the second part of the question, Shailly?
What do you see sort of like as a vision for restorative justice, the way we sort of think of it? Yeah.
I see a vision for restorative justice as a way to help people, help people, but mainly as a way, as an alternative for like you said earlier in this training, you said something about using this instead of the criminal justice system for crimes that in all honesty shouldn't really have such of a high sentence, like what's it called, like kids that need to get to school but they lost their Metro card. Lord knows I've lost my Metro card a few times, and I need to get to school. And also other kids who may steal something from a store, but it's not like they stole a toy or something from the store. It's that they stole something edible from a store, which leads you to think, hey, maybe that kid doesn't have the things to eat at home. So you might want, so instead of just punishing people for circumstances that they can't really control and they're just trying to get by through the day, you could probably have the community come in and find and solve, and instead of solving the cause of an issue, instead of solving the effect of an issue, something that was caused because of something, they actually can find the root of an issue together as a community and end it right there at the source, or at least do something to make sure that it just doesn't happen again or as frequently again, because they've come up with a framework to solve the cause of it, the root cause of it. And that's my vision for TRC.
Right. And also, thank you. And also, Dean Price told me that since he started implementing the restorative justice process within the school, that suspension rate dropped 60%. So when we're talking about the school to prison pipeline and really minimizing the effect on our young people in this punitive response to actions, that if we create this other model within even institutions that, have some problems, that we can at least minimize we can rupture the pipeline to prison, let's say it that way. And so but the way that happens is exactly what Erica was talking about, that you have an ongoing sense of a community space where people are building relationships, getting to know each other in a different way, so that if there is a problem, maybe before it gets to the point of a violation of some code, it's already been addressed, right? And so this is what I think I said the first day, which is like, it feels like we're in wartime. We probably have felt this way, most of us, for a few years now, if not for our whole life. But even in wartime, we can't all just be emergency room doctors just taking care after the ruptures. Some of us can work on the healing modalities, and so that there is an option, and there is something to offer when the screaming and yelling stops. So I do, and the thing that I want to emphasize after listening to this discussion is that this model may look soft from the outside, is an act of courage. I do think it's an act of reclaiming power, because we are reclaiming it as people sitting in the space, sharing the space and the power without needing any permission from anybody to do so. Like there is a reclaiming of our own individual power in the process. So I do think it is a courageous event, though it looks from the outside as, oh, they're just sitting in a circle chatting. But we all have understood that it's something else. But I think, Professor, one of the problems I'm always having is how to articulate this to people that have not experienced it. Like, I think we all really struggle with language. So Charles is not the only one. I struggle with language after 5 years of devoting my time to this work, because it's like it's sort of like the closest experience I can have is if you walked into a room and you just saw people sitting there in meditation, you're like, oh, they're just zoning out. Like, but I know how much work it is to actually create the structure to meditate. Like, we all know how difficult it is to get there. So it just looks easy from the outside, but if you're actually doing transformative internal work within a person in a community and amongst ourselves, it's actually a deep dive. So it's very hard to explain meditation for somebody who doesn't want to experience it. It's not just sitting there zoning out. And I'm trying to think of other things that just look easy from the outside, or restorative yoga, if you ever, or deep stretching. It looks like, oh, they're just touching their toes. But if you're in a deep stretch, that's a lot of work you're doing. So maybe that's even a better metaphor. We're doing deep stretches, and it just looks like if you walk in, they're just sitting around touching their toes. How's this work? But it's try it if you think it's not work. So we need help with that language always. And so I'm so happy to have new people to help us try to say it in different ways. And that's why I love panels, because everybody says it in a different way, and maybe that'll resonate for one person or another. Do you want to reflect on that, Professor?
Yes, one of the, I call them underlying questions that I begin my race and law classes and law and racism class, because it's specific to, we're going to talk about race. And there's the current movement to longitudinally talk about race throughout the law school curriculum. Whereas, how do you teach a criminal law class and don't focus on race or don't address race? How do you teach con law? Those are larger issues. But when we have those specific courses called law and racism and law, the question that I begin the class with is, how do you get people to see what they don't want to say? If we don't want as a society to even say race, racist, racism, how are you going to get professionals, legal professionals, medical professionals, decision makers, the judge, jury, how are we going to get this to this structural change if they don't even want to say the word racism or race? So I think that this moment in time, this societal unrest is helping to add race and racism and other terms that were so explosive they were just avoided. You just didn't even say them, or you would be accused of pulling the race card. So we're at the climate, I think, is right for people to, that people are opening up to, oh, I can see race. I can see race, racism. I can not only see race and racism, I can expand my knowledge base to know that races needs to be a part of the discourse in the United States, because the binary paradigm, the black, white, due to enslavement, has maintained us talking about race with these two races in mind and disregarding all other races. So now the climate is opening up to talk about races and its impact. And so I think that my question of not only how to how to get decision makers to see what they don't want to say is then after they say it, what I'm going to try to use this model with my in my work is to address what happens when those feelings open up and how to translate the feeling into empathy, into being able to put yourself in the other's situation and make a decision about their life. You've never missed the train because you didn't have your ticket because you were always driven to school. But if a decision maker is forced to hear the stories of what it took for someone else to get to school, then that opens up those corridors that I think restorative justice does say. I never even thought about that because I didn't have to think about it. But now I'm in a decision-making capacity, and I need to understand that it's something else we can do rather than put you in suspension. We may need to think about what can we do to help. So I'm dealing with all of that.
So I was lucky enough to, I took a year from my day job before I quit it. And this about, and I went around the world and I studied every model I could get my hands on that was either called restorative justice or whatever the label was, mediation, everything. I studied it all. I went to all the teachers I could find. I went to the country of Jamaica because they had some funding to start community centers in restorative justice. And it was great to meet locally to meet people in the centers that were locally housed in communities, even though it was funded by the government. So I went to a few of them. The head of the program drove me around. It was just an amazing week. And I spoke to the facilitators, and they were having problems because the model of restorative justice that they were using was a very bureaucratic model, I would say, where there was a list of questions they could ask and nothing else. So it was, they didn't share their stories, and it wasn't a storytelling model. Ours is based on the power of story sharing to develop empathy and open the door for vulnerability. So we have a very specific sort of take on restorative justice and how to use the power of the elements of the earth and story sharing and all that. So we had like a very specific way in. They had a way in that was frustrating to the facilitators. And so, but I say all that to prelude the potential for restorative justice. So I went, I'm a big Bob Marley fan, so I went to his home where he'd recorded, and it was like really special. And then there was actually, in that same community, there was a restorative justice center, so I went to it. And a Rastafarian man who had been coming to the center was there, and I was given the opportunity to speak to him and inquire about his experience as a participant in these community centers for restorative justice. And he spoke about how what the community, the Rastafarian community, has suffered through many different governments in Jamaica, and all the suffering that the community has gone through, and the suffering is the good word. And how much the relationship between the Rastafarian community and the government had been ruptured over time. And so I asked, why are you here? Why do you come to this center? And I think this is like one of the most brilliant things anybody on the planet ever said to me. He goes, I see restorative justice as an opportunity for the government to repair the relations with the citizens. And I'm like, whoa, because I had always thought of restorative justice as it's our community, it's for us, it's grassroots, it's not, leave the institutions out of it. But then I just like opened my mind to, there will be some moment in time where there will be a day after, I don't know what else to call it, where people were like, okay, how are we going to repair the rupture between our educational institutions, our criminal justice institutions, our institutional governance with the lost faith of people in them? Like, and so this Rastafarian man was willing to give restorative justice a chance because in it he saw the government's attempt to repair the injury that the government itself had caused its communities. And I think that moment will, and I pray that moment will come for us, that there will be an opportunity not just to, you know, complain, or not even complain is not the right word, call out institutions for their failings, but to actually rebuild them in a way that manifests what we as individuals know who we truly are. There's a, Charles, do you want to read a chat? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Professor.
Oh, I just, that was beautiful because I feel like I have the answer. I feel like I want to be a student. I have the answer. The question was when, you know, the government will get to that point to understand that it needs to repair the rupture. And my desire is when the government is comprised of the new generation of thinkers who think differently, because then their responses to and their acknowledgement of the rupture will be so present that they will be able to stand and say it and everybody will understand. And I don't know, I hadn't been able to watch television and that's for a good thing, but the Representative Cortez just stood up for so much in terms of what power looks like when people have a different frame of reference, and that different frame of reference is what has been trampled upon. But she's in the position to articulate, and I'm a survivor, and I'm speaking for so many other people, and you're going to recognize the rupture. I think that's the momentum that we're in right now, when the government is not a building, it's comprised of individuals. And when those, just like we talk about the framers thought, well, who are the framers and how many slaves did they own? And who were they talking about? So now we're at a position in which if we can get this power structure right and understand that the minds of the people who are making decisions can make these changes, that's when I think the answer.
And with that, I would love to invite the 4 externs, I think they're all on, to just join the panel and introduce yourself, because this is exactly what we're talking about, the next generation of leaders. And they all have projects that they wanted to work on with TRC this fall. So I think let's just hear from them. It would be really, when you spoke, Professor, I had hope in the first time in a long time in my heart. So thank you, I needed to hear that. Tamara, you want to start with you and then just we'll pass it around?
Okay. Hi, I'm Tamara Veal. I'm interning with Professor Agnihotri for this fall semester. And with my internship, I'm going to be focusing on like program development. So I would like to bring essentially something like TRC or extending TRC into Baton Rouge and bring a circle program like that to our community. I'm still kind of working out some things. I know I do want it to be community focused, but then I remember throughout this week hearing different people's stories. Specifically, I think it was Miss Jonnae. She was talking about how attorneys, it's hard for them to be vulnerable, be emotional. And so I would like to have a circle, I guess, specifically for attorneys to be able to talk about things that I guess they can't normally talk about or feel it's hard for them to talk about because of their profession. Also with just certain subsections of different groups. So I also was looking at like habitual offenders, depending on the crime that they do.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that I want you to focus on the community circles for the fall, because that's a big project on itself. And if we could just find the right group of people and the right circumstances, and you start doing exactly what Erica was doing, which is just have them every week. So there's a anchor circle for the community, whatever community you decide to define it as. That sounds great. And I think that's a big project already for the fall. So if anybody wants to, so Tamara, will you also collect all the emails of the Baton Rouge participants, because I don't have access to everybody's email. So can you put that in the chat wherever you want them to send their email so you can gather up community members?
Yeah, I'll put in my email, and then you guys can just flood it with that. I'll put into like a spreadsheet so I can organize it.
Great, that's a great first thing. Miss Miller.
Sorry, I had to figure out how to unmute. Hi everyone, my name is Jonnae Miller. As an extern, my area of focus will really be police officers and the community policing commissions. And I plan to deep dive into some of the community police reports, such as the Ferguson report and the Christopher Commission, which examined kind of the structures of both the Ferguson Police Department and the LAPD. And throughout that, I plan to really get community feedback and just try to advocate for the reconstruction of the foundation of policing commissions and implement restorative justice as the model in which to replace it with, kind of like how we were talking earlier, like building those relationships and getting the government, or not necessarily the government, but these policing commissions to attempt to repair the relationships between the community and the police officers in those communities, and just try to figure out a way in which to answer the difficult question of how to get police trained differently in a way in which it will restore those relationships.
And I know this was a brave topic for you. This was a hard one. So thank you for being courageous about it.
I think this is like my third time saying it out loud. And I'm more confident now that it's like, okay, it's a lot, but it can be done. And like you told me, if no one does it, well, if we don't do it, who? So thank you for the opportunity. I'm just grateful to get the work done and make it happen.
Wonderful. Jennifer.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Cameron. I am the wife of a wrongfully convicted man who is doing time at Angola. I'm also an SULC student, obviously. So my focus is going to be how to implement these circles for parole and clemency situations so that we can start, I'm hoping to start bridging the gap with our victims and minimizing victim opposition at some point if we can. I'm starting my research with how other states have implemented legislation to protect this project or this type of thing, as far as like confidentiality of the groups and stuff like that, because that's definitely got to be addressed first. So that's what I'm doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. And so I asked Cassie to just come on, but I don't know if she's not camera ready. But we've already started really thinking about how the model that we've created that you have learned as a community circle, how that can be enhanced with the support structures that this circle work needs in situations where there's highly charged situations. For example, people on parole wanting to reintegrate into the community by having conversations with people that were affected by their actions years ago. Or my dream, and I think Cassie, I will speak for both of us, our dream is to be able to do this work to offer a restorative justice process for people on death row, so that the people affected by their actions years ago can sit in a circle space with them. And now we know it can even happen virtually, can sit in a circle space with them, so that the potential for requesting a commutation of sentence is there. So, but I want to be clear that what we've taught so far is just the foundational principle. We'll be able to, the foundational principles of running a community circle. The more advanced work, which is, for example, conflict situations or parole hearings or parole issues, or what Jennifer is going to deep dive on, require a more structured approach. So Cassie and I have been working on what this structured approach looks like. Do you want to summarize it for people, Cassie, right now?
Sure. I want to make sure I understand your question. I guess like in terms of where.
Well, I can keep going. I mean, so basically.
Okay. Yeah. Just.
Yeah,
I think you're on a.
I put you on the spot always. But so basically, if we're having a circle, let's just imagine we're having a circle with somebody on death row. How would that? And the goal is at some point, if it works out, if it's okay, we're going to have a circle with the person on death row and the family of the person that was killed. That's the goal. How are we going to get to that goal? Incrementally and deliberately, one step at a time. Meaning that first, we would have a circle process with the person, like I'll just say the incarcerated, with the incarcerated and a few supportive people, meaning that somebody from the community that supports them, family member that maybe visits them, maybe somebody, a fellow inmate. I'm just making up a list right now. So that would be called sort of an affinity circle just for that person. And I would imagine you would need to have at least 4 of those circles to actually get to a point where the group could decide, you know what, I think this person is ready to sit in the space with the community that was affected, okay? Maybe it takes 8 circles. And then if that is true, then you get in touch with the person who lost the family member or the community member, and you start creating an affinity circle for that group. And that group would have not only the person, family members or community members affected, but neutral community members that don't know anything about the facts, right? And they would start meeting, and they would meet at least 4 times, maybe 8 times, maybe 16 times, till they decide, you know what, I think you're ready to listen to what the incarcerated person wants to say to you. So both people would have to say yes, both groups. And the truth is that we rely upon the wisdom of the community always. And we believe that if you have a circle process, the people that are supportive of the people that lost loved ones and the people that are supportive of the incarcerated, they will give them good guidance. Hey, you're not ready to sit in that space. Or, you know what, I think you're ready to hear what needs to be said. But it's a process. We believe in the process, right? So after these series of circles, at some point, this group can merge, and then you have the full-on restorative justice circle with everybody together in a very structured space with assigned seats. A lot of pre-circle work had already happened. So this in our model would be called an extra large circle. Yeah, so this is more advanced, but I just want to give you guys the scope of this work beyond just the foundations that we taught this week. Ms. Jackson.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kire Jackson. I'm a Rising 2L at Southern University Law Center. For this externship opportunity, I've talked a lot with Professor Agnihotri, but essentially from what we talked about last week, I'd love to get involved with being able to participate in teaching as well as leading in the trainings that we'll have in the future. So just being able to witness this whole opportunity this week has been great, and trying to see where I'd be able to take part in the future.
Yeah, and you know how, Professor, you know this, when you see students who are just born to teach, you know, like,
yeah, yes, actually, yes.
Miss Jackson is, I mean, they're all leaders and teachers, but I'm like, you know what, I think you would be really great at learning how to teach this. And I'm glad, I'm so happy to see you. Charles, do you want to add as a, I don't know what term we're going to come up with you. Are you an intern? But what Charles is also working with TRC, and what programming do you want to work on?
I'm working on, so the Southern University 771 Alliance has taken on this new initiative just to become the organizing body of Southern University. In the past, our motto was to seek injustice and to restore it, pretty much, to be the educating center of a community, educating and equipping our community and our peers at Southern University about what's happening around them. But, you know, with other organizations like the SUNAACP, the Southern University Pre-Law Society, we realized that we don't really need to have that goal. We don't need that motto because other people are doing it and they're doing it perfectly. So what we need to do is become the TRC of Southern University, become the organizing body, to call these organizations together to sit down in one spot and talk about how we can all work to do one goal. Because if each organization has the same goal of, let's say, planting more trees on campus, and we're each bugging people, we're each talking to the counselors and the chancellors and whatnot. We're really just bothering these people. But if we come together as one and speak in one voice, we'd be more impactful and more powerful. So my vision for the TRC and for restorative justice is to just organize my peers and to lay the foundation for something that's greater for when we're not even on campus anymore.
I mean, come on. Deirdre and I were both like grinning ear to ear. The TRC of like, I mean, Deirdre, you want to say anything about anything you've heard?
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think it was 2 years ago we had a TRC meeting. I think it's more of a retreat, and we were talking about what is it that we need to do as a center. And we had talked a lot about like, well, we need to root down and then we need to expand. And it's beautiful to see that we've been able to root down and find enough of a foundation to now expand on that foundation. And it feels really great to see where we are today. And I remember when I first came, I was like, I could see it going here, I could see it going here. And Shailly was like, let's root down, you know, like, and I imagine it like a tree. And we had to really have a really good foundation before we could branch out, because in order to do that, like, we don't want our branches all over the place and crooked and just dilapidated. We want it to be a firm foundation for us to be able to go to where we need to go, which is everywhere. Expand.
And I am all, yes, thank you, Deirdre. And, you know, Deirdre is like, you know, the anchor of TRC, but it's sort of like, for me, it's like, it's too important an opportunity, too important a mission, too important a time in history to not be really anchored in profound truths if we're going to do this work. That's why we have to deep dive, because superficial work will only result in superficial changes. And that's like, you know, the lesson of Rodney King, like, you know, why are we back here 28 years later? Because we just made superficial pronouncements. We didn't really change anything. And so if this is not a moment in time to really do the work, which will require deep work with us, I don't know what is. And the caution I always put out there is that we have to be mindful that there will be, it's like the hero's journey. You go down this path, there's going to be allies, but there are going to be obstacles, and we have to have resiliency. And as a team, I think we will. Like, Erica, did you want to say something about that? You look like you were about to say something. Yeah.
You know, I like what has been so powerful have been the 4 phases of the circle. Like, I can always tell when I'm in the presence of a gathering and we haven't bonded as a community. Often the prompt starts in phase 3 and we haven't done phase 1 and phase 2. And it is so obvious. And I don't think I realize the power of the connecting because I notice it when it's not there. And when it's there, it's like now I recognize when it's there, but the first time that I really started to recognize this coming together, you're gathering and you have this sort of fake connection, and that it is so important to really honor those phases, because those phases are critical in bringing the collective together, so that those hard conversations can be had in a space of trust and can really be heard. But if you don't do the phases, then you're starting on shaky ground.
And you're starting on like, yeah, shaky ground, and it will easily rupture because people will either just get more angry, they will not feel heard, or they'll walk out of there rolling their eyes. Yeah, this is restorative justice. I mean, that's the danger, right? Because this label can be taken by anybody. I'm a restorative justice practitioner. Hello, welcome. Thank you for coming. This is my space. I'm so great. I'm so-and-so. Please introduce yourself. And already this is like the opposite of what we're trying to do. But that's a different, and I'm not trying to I am trying to mock it, but I'm sorry, forgive me for doing that. But I just wanted to make an example that I have been in spaces, even in restorative justice. I was in this council for this, organization that I was trying to start up as a restorative justice council. And the meetings we would have were the opposite of restorative justice meetings. It was one person after the other bragging about themselves. And I'm like, how is this? This is not the way to get where we're going. So I feel like we have a unique doorway. Let me just put it this way. We have a unique doorway into this work. It's not a doorway everybody will necessarily want to go into, but I do believe that if we create the space, people will come. Yeah. And I guess, I think, Jennifer, did you want to share something that you texted me?
Yeah, I had sent it straight to you, Shailly, just because I don't like to interrupt people, or I try not to. But one thing that's been really cool for me this week is every night when I speak to my husband, I tell him he wants to know what we've been doing during the day. And he was already really excited about where I was going with the externship and everything. But he's already identifying ways that we can use just the community circles, the circles that we've been doing this week within the inmate population at the facilities. I mean, and then I start thinking about it and I'm like, well, you got 86 men stuck in a dorm together. And, you know, some of them, there's always going to be issues. So this would be a way for them to start kind of maybe taking control of their own environment. So he's really excited about it. Although he has decided he's coming home soon, so we can't use him as a leader. We've got to find somebody else. So throw that out there.
Here he'll be home soon. One of the people that is on parole, was incarcerated for many years, told me that when he was, because we were talking about how we use the elements of the earth in our prompts and as a root foundation for story prompts and as a centerpiece. And he said, well, that's really interesting because when they would have time for showering, he would actually take a really quick shower just because there was a window in the room with the showers so that he could look out the window and see nature. Like, I mean, the disconnect from nature as one of our philosophies that we use in the way that we structure our prompts by connecting to the elements. The disconnect from nature is an institutional, like, I don't know how to call it, institutional barrier to connecting to one's own humanity that is often used. So the idea that a prisoner is rushing a shower so they can look out a window and see like the sky and the clouds or the river, because he was by the Hudson River when he was incarcerated. And then the other thing he talked about was in the visiting room, one time a person brought a baby and the baby started crying, and the mother tried to say, oh, shush, shush. And they're like, please let the baby cry. It's so nice to hear the sound of a baby. So like, I think that we are onto something when I hear stories like that, that we are onto some truths about what stories people really want to share. So when we develop our prompts for storytelling, and I think this is the lesson I don't feel like we spend enough time on this week, but when we talk about storytelling in phase 2, really it's important to ground those prompts into the earth, into the elements of the earth, into not any feelings, not psychological stories, not psychodramas, not intellectual discourse, but really grounded into being a human on this planet. I think we're all yearning for that reconnection to this planet, and definitely the planet's like, get your act together, people. So that's what I wanted to say. So does anybody else want to comment on any of the things we've said so far? What I'm going to do, because I feel like, you know, when we set this up, we didn't know how many people were coming or how many people were not coming. So I set it up as a panel discussion, and now I'm missing everybody's face. So I'm just going to make all the attendees panelists, if that's okay, and we can just all see each other's face. So the question and answers can be all interactive. And I just want to say one more thing before I do that, which is the idea of success. So I think I just want to be clear what success looks like, so we don't fall into a trap, because that could be a shadow for some of us. So Erica, can you guide us on like how to define success in this work?
You know, a circle is held, and creating the space for a circle, that is, it's not about how many show up. It's not about, you know, beating yourself up. I shouldn't have done that prompt. I shouldn't have done this, or I should do this. It's there. The success is that the space was created, and if it's you and another person, then it's you and another person, and that's success. It's the creating of the space is really, really check. Space was created.
And I think that's really important because I think a lot of people, especially institutions that have a different idea of success and they want to impose their values on us, can mess with our heads. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, it could mess with my head that, I'll give you a very clear example, that not everybody that registered is here at the last day, that somehow this is a failure. But that would be a real disservice to myself. Would you guys agree with that? I mean, like, the idea that I don't know what else to say except that. Like, the right people will always show up. That's what I know.
Absolutely.
And if it's 3 people and that's how you start, that's how you start. So in some ways we actually have to redefine success to do this work, because if we end up using old paradigm language and old paradigm criteria, we end up doing ourselves a disservice. So now we have a beautiful group of panelists. So you guys, this is a question and answer time for these stellar panelists or workers. So I don't know how to manage the questions. Maybe, does somebody have a suggestion of how to manage questions? So just speak up, we'll manage it.
So last night, well, really at around 2 o'clock here, because I'm in Georgia, but I did a meeting with some older classmates from my high school. We started on an organization called Ear to the Streets Los Angeles. I'm back home to try and educate the community about systemic racism and things of that nature. And we were all kind of experiencing, to a certain extent, a form of, exhaustion, especially in our different areas. I have one friend, she's not used to doing more organized work. She's a more creative and emotional individual. And then I have another friend, she's extremely organized, but it wasn't organized. And so, when I did share with them, what I've learned throughout the week, that's, for us, that seemed like the answer to the issue at hand, kind of removing the idea of a, obsessive, structure, and just having a circle where we all play a certain role and all have an input, and because we have been trying to plan events and this and that, but it was like, you had the person who's not the best with words trying to do an event where they have to speak to everybody when they're more so somebody who expresses through creativity. So we realized, it's important to, address your shadows, your discomforts, and use those as things to understand yourself as an individual before you come into the circle, before you come into an organization. And, just sharing that with them, and I shared that on the stuff that I wrote down this week and all that. And I can definitely see how that, they said that the phases were like a genius idea and, a great way to create a community. Because that was the thing, that it was kind of like a weird connection. But once we understand each other, as we understand ourselves, that allows for actual work to get done. So I definitely think that is definitely one of the best lessons I've learned in a long time.
It's been so amazing to have you and have your voice. You're just always a voice of wisdom. The truth is, like, when you go to meetings and they just start somewhere without laying the foundation, and the conversations don't go anywhere, it pains me, because I'm like, you guys, there is a structure to how to have this meaningfully. Yeah, I'm glad, so glad to have you here. Is Florence, would you like to share anything right now with this panel or ask anything?
No, just loving the insight and the bravery of Erica with her her group circle with 80 people was amazing. And then just getting new insights for how to look at the different things that Ms. Deleso was sharing. So, nope.
Okay.
Just listening and taking everything in. Thank you.
Sure.
Cynthia has a question or a comment.
Great.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily a question. It's more of a comment. And what I really enjoyed, Shailly, yesterday when we did that, I think it was yesterday, but the portion about self-care, where what element are we, the air, the fire, the earth? Well, I'm definitely air, and I have so many thoughts going through my head right now, but I did try to write down a few to put it on paper. I really appreciate how you incorporate the younger generation, like the high school, like with Brian and the others, to really start a foundation there. And then from there, it's going to grow even more. So I do appreciate that, like with our mentors also in our groups. Thank you very much for that. That really gives me a lot of hope for the future as well regarding that. And then the other thing is what I really drew out of it, there's so many ways we can utilize this, just in our own circle. Yesterday, I was talking with Florence and Jannara and our professor, Alford, starting like with the group and using self-care in other groups as well. I'm sorry, circles in other groups to help individuals. So there's so much potential for this. And I'm really proud and privileged to be a part of this group. And I'm hoping that you can utilize, I'm here, utilize me in whatever way you need to or can. Thank you.
So if you guys can just do me a favor, and Tamara shared her email. So she's collecting the email and names of people that want to stay in touch, or go to our website and put in there that you want to stay in touch. Please do that, because I think this is how we grow. This is the model. It's grassroots. Professor, let's just talk about our vision with Southern and how we're going to sort of ground the excellent students that are already, going to be starting to do work, and the community members that are all circling Southern University as an anchor point.
Yes, yes. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say greetings on behalf of Chancellor Pierre, because he had agreed to be on the panel, and he said that he had some emergency things to occur, but he said, I think you'd be great to stay in my stead. I said, no, I'm a participant this time. And so he said, no, go ahead. And so I expressed his level of excitement just with you. I'm going to tell you, Shailly, when he told me about it initially, and your energy is infectious. And so anybody who knows what you've done and how you felt about the restorative justice model, you can't help but say, how can I get some? And as I was listening to the externs, and I'm just so proud, my heart is all big with the SU lawyer leaders and hearing the leadership, I am saying, I'm in. The chancellor has stated that we can count on Southern University Law Center as a collaborator, as a entity that not only will help, but to partner. And the chancellor is willing to expand Southern Law Center's existing partnerships to this restorative justice model. Now, how we effectuate that is going to take some work. And I love the idea of the person who spoke about organizing groups. The people that have been exposed to this restorative justice model, I'm thinking now, and I'm about going to say that I will be a conduit as the voice or the party who can let the chancellor know what we're thinking about, because he's such a visionary, and I'm amazed at all of the things that he does, but he keeps it, and he's able to say, this is the way it should be, and he helps. So I guess what I'm saying in a nutshell is that we have a willing party in Southern University Law Center to collaborate and to make something happen. And I had initially, because I've been trained to think in this compartmentalized way, I love the fact that the restorative justice model is intergenerational in the circle, and getting that input and really learning to listen to other voices at different phases of their lives. That's what I'm thinking the benefit comes in when we listen to each other. But what I was initially going to suggest, and perhaps this would be the pool for Baton Rouge, is Southern University Law Center has existing partnerships with entities that deal with high school students, the specialty UREC, Urban Restoration Group, the Minority Law and Research Institute, Marshall Brennan. It helps build a pipeline of high school students. So that's an audience, right, or potential participants. The chancellor also suggested that we can explore our existing relationships with SUS system in terms of the undergraduate. And then, of course, we have the ambassadors, the externs for Southern University Law Center, who can go and spread the word, and we can determine how we want it to look like. And initially, I was thinking these were separate partnerships, but as I'm thinking more deeply, it would be just, I guess, phenomenal to have intergenerational representatives in a circle from these various partnerships. And I think that we're just at the point now that we can build and think about it deeper. So
that's such, I mean, really, Chancellor Pierre has been such a great ally, and you're right, he is a visionary. He can sort of see the potential of restorative justice for this moment in time and how to integrate it into the educational systems. And I feel that restorative justice, my vision, is to have a Restorative Justice Institute where we are teaching and training police officers, young people, law students, lawyers, doctors, whatever. We're training on how to do this in different places. We're actually holding circles for very complex issues that more expertise is required. And we're creating a body of academic writing, Professor, because I think this needs to be explained in simple language, in op-ed pieces, and complex ways to academic institutions. We need to spread the word, because I mean, it's like time to do it. I don't know what else to say about it. Ms. Morris, will you please share with us what you have, please?
Good morning, everyone. I was just, I just posted a little bit earlier about the model. I thought it was, it's extraordinary, but also used in a preventative measure.
Can you just introduce who you are? Because I don't think everybody knows, yeah. You're a professor also, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a professor also at Southern University. I teach legal writing, wills and trust, taught some various courses there. So I look forward to meeting all of you guys that are coming in the fall semester via Zoom or whatever way we're going to do it. We don't know yet, but either way will be effective. I tend to interact a lot with my students, and one of the reasons I became a professor is, which I think goes into this model as well, is a lot of things that I felt like could have been, that were beneficial to me in law school, as well as could have been done differently. I wanted to try to implement that with my students, because the biggest goal is for you guys to be successful. And that's the thing. But I was saying that, I thought that this would be a preventative model as well. Not just, I think we focus too much on fixing problems. It's like we allow the problems to happen. They just go on and go on and go on and go on. And people see that something is wrong. They know that something is wrong, but they never stop it, or they never try to stop it. They never try to prevent something from happening. Even, and this is not just criminal justice. This is, even with young people, we see that they tackle certain issues. And I'm just going to use my law students, for example. If my law student is not able to critically read or critically think, where do I go? Do I just continue to let them matriculate through the law center and they're not focusing on this which is really important, and really important part of law school, to be able to critically think and critically read? If I know that they're not doing that, what do I do to prevent it? What do I do to say, okay, how can I help them? So I look at the circle and this model as being something that we could use also to prevent things from actually happening, and stop focusing on fixing things like the maintenance of the car. You know, we maintain it. We maintain this level of you know, of actually not fixing or repairing, but saying we're not going to allow it to happen. We're not going to let the oil run out of the car. We're going to put oil in the car. You get what I'm saying? So that's all I want to say.
I sort of see it also, Professor, as sort of like an asset model. Like instead of always looking at deficits in our work, in our communities, within each other, we build on the assets that are already there. You know, and it's sort of like a different way of looking at human beings too, instead of always what needs to be fixed, what's already working. I mean, and it's build on that, and every good teacher already does that. So I'm just, I think the model tries to use that.
I think that's excellent. That goes beyond, you know, what if the crimes were never done, you know, the act was never taken, we wouldn't have criminal justice system, right? What makes life better, that's exactly, currently there's much discussion about, instead of just saying very bad health, look at what are the drivers of this bad health and examine those factors. Look at where the person lives, look at the education, the drivers. It's weird. It's a climate now in which we're just not trying to fix a problem, but looking at the root of the problem. And before it gets to a problem, to get to the problem, let's address that. Like, can we, instead of this pipeline to this prison, can it be a pipeline to this pursuit of your divine purpose? Do you learn in a circle, you're a writer, rather than you know, there's something about what you intuitively do well that you need to just be exposed to it, then you go a different route. So that's I think that's wonderful.
And I think you also had a quote you wanted to share, Ms. Morris.
Oh, I was just, Professor Alford said something and I was like, wow, you know, I just read this quote today. And Dwight Eisenhower says, I think that people want peace so much that one of these days government had better get out of their way and let them have it. You were talking about government and how, you know, we rely on government too much. I mean, I think we just really focus on government, voting. Yes, let's vote. Please, let's vote. But the thing is, I don't think we realize and see that we are the people that make up everything. We make the laws. We are the ones that make the laws. So it's crazy to me that we sit back and we let politicians run to the legislature and say, oh, this is what the people want. And we never say, no, that's not what we want. We want this. This is the power that we have to drive this system. So if the system is broken, there's something within the communities that are broken as well. But that was what I want to say. I'm sorry. Y'all know I talk a lot.
Thank you for saying that. I feel like I just want to keep saying, I just want to keep going down that road and say that what happens is, I think from my point of view, is that we talked about this a little bit, like as lawyers that work in a institution that is dysfunctional, we end up internalizing the dysfunction. And so we become like removed from ourselves and our own humanity. So that's why I do think that building this model needs to be from the ground up and outside of the umbrella of institutions that want to corrupt it in some way to just feed itself. It's like the empty void that it just kept getting filled. So that's why I really do believe that keeping it as a grassroots organization is the way to go. Of course, aligning with partners like Southern and other organizations that are going to support us. And obviously we need to find, and this is another complicated thing for me as a former public defender, because I have such a weird relationship to money, but we also need to find funding. Like, you know, imagine like all week, Deirdre has a full-time job and she's doing this training as a volunteer. Because I can't hire Deirdre. I can't hire myself. We don't have money for that yet, but we need to have money for that because this work requires, you know, more than, you know, we've already given it our best, but it requires that we not have to run around and do 5,000 other things to be able to do this work. And so the infrastructure of a grassroots organization does need to be built up, because I think now we've rooted down enough that we can create around it a sustainable building that can have many doors for people to come in and learn things and do things. And we can facilitate the process for many organizations that will need it, including police departments that will now have a mandate to start community policing. What does that look like? What is community? What does that mean to be part of the community? Nobody knows. We don't even know as community members until we create the space for it. So, I mean, I think the need will be even more, but so we need to, now that Deirdre said, yes, we've rooted down, now, you know, now we need the structure around us to sustain us long-term for all the work that is apparently, you know, is apparent to all of us, I would say. I think Jen is saying, Jen wanted to say something. Sorry, Jen, we got lost in other conversations.
No, I just really wanted to add that I really appreciated this week and how you have really held true to the theory and the mind that all minds of all ages, all generations have equal value. Because I would say one thing that's frustrating for me as a special education advocate in public schools is that decisions of the institution of public education they're always made by leaders as administrators, and they never incorporate the thoughts or the voice of the students. And one thing that I've even talked to Chancellor Pierre about that I'm really kind of thinking about, I was thinking about starting myself, was just a student group that has kind of, you know, local governance of themselves, as well as, because they're not taught, there's no curriculum in public schools for social emotional development and how to connect with others and ways to respond when things are difficult. And the only time those kids actually get service is when they're identified with a disability. And when you talk about the pipeline to prison, it's so much more than really what people even fathom. Like psychologists, we administer standardized assessments for individuals to determine if they have a disability. But if you're not in this field, you wouldn't even know that the assessments that we use are actually developed and they're biased against minority children. So we're disproportionately identifying individuals with disabilities who likely don't have them. They just haven't had the right access to the educational exposure. And we're then looking and saying that there's something wrong with that individual. Well, we know in the basics of psychology, when you tell yourself you are something and you hear that all your life, you become it. It's this self-fulfilling prophecy. So if we label kids with disabilities and say they've got an emotional disturbance, what am I to believe different about myself if that's been my entire life journey prior to my independent living? So I don't know, it's something that really resonates. I've always heard about restorative justice. I actually stumbled across it on Southern's website. And as a school psych, I've always heard it and heard people talk about it. And I thought it was more of like a disciplinary action type of initiative to kind of work out the kinks within the community for historical patterns. But I'm really inspired and encouraged by the direction that you're taking it, because I think developing citizenship starts with our babies in the public schools. And I think if we don't give access to them there and teach them these skills, that we are all connected, whether we like it or not, we're all connected and we are all responsible for the good of all. It's our duty. And if we don't teach that, there's nowhere it's going to come from. So I'm really inspired by the work that you're doing. And I just want to say thank you so much, and having it being an open opportunity for people to enroll in the training this week.
Oh, thank you for your voice in the mix. Really appreciate it. Ms. Smith.
Hi everyone. I finally stopped crying. I'm doing much better because I know I probably kind of like scared you guys a little bit, but
you didn't scare
I'm
me.
doing I am doing much better. I have actually been journaling throughout the session and on my lunch break, and this I have trained and this is not bragging, all over the world. And this has been one of my favorites. My top 3, number 1, I must say. But because of the people, I love the different aspects that you guys bring, the different energies, and I just can't say enough. And I don't know, I'm not connected to Southern University per se, law program or anything like that. I got invited to the program from one of my Facebook friends, actually, that is connected to some of the organizers on Southern's campus. And she just thought that this would have been an amazing opportunity for me because she knows my characteristics and my values. And that's how I actually, and I had a lot that I'm doing this week. And I said, Restorative Justice, I'm all in. Like, I was like, I'm in. And just to have this experience is wonderful to me. I've connected with several of you guys, and I just love the way the program is. It's very transparent. I want to stay involved. I want to just stay connected to you guys as much as possible. I feel like we need a community circle. Like, I feel like, I guess this is hard to say, like, I don't think I will want to run a circle without you guys. So I'll probably be emailing y'all want to do a circle, you know, because just the way that we flow and the way that we gravitate to each other. So this has been so insightful for me. But I do have a question for you guys. Outside of that, I'm just in the moment. So I'm an ACE educator, and if you guys are not familiar with ACE, the program is Adverse Childhood Experiences, and it's by Louisiana Department of Health. And so what happened is, because I do research, I found out that the study was actually given in, I think it was 1967 or 1970, to middle-class white kids only. Now, this is almost like a restorative process. This is the same, the framework is similar to the same as this process that we have here. And I was just kind of curious because we were on a call last week, and it's just been puzzling on my mind. I did the training back in November, but I've always knew what childhood trauma was, you know, and so conflict resolution through other trainings and all of that. So I wasn't foreign to it. It's just that the study was given on 100 white children. So in terms, the program wants us to go into different populations and explain what adverse childhood experiences is and go through, we have core talks, we have a whole curriculum, the framework, everything that we need. And I was just kind of puzzled, and I wanted some of you guys, I love the way you guys think, so I just wanted just a little feedback on what do you think about, especially as a Black woman, going into a community, speaking to people of color, and discussing this ACE framework, knowing that the test wasn't even done on minorities and that we were excluded from this, and try to explain when it doesn't relate to us. I think
Erica should take this question. Yeah, she's
okay.
a principal at an educator, so yeah.
Oh yeah, I would love that. I would love that. You know, how do y'all feel about me coming in as an educator, speaking to your kids, whether they're biracial, minority, whatever, and knowing that this study wasn't even conducted with them? And I just would love that feedback, because I was just like, oh God, this is such a wonderful program, but I'm like, nah, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it, you know, being that, you know, it excluded us. So we, you know, everybody thinks differently. We have a different approach. We're raised different. So I was just curious on you guys take on that.
I would love Erica to answer.
You know, I don't know the research that well, so I'm like, now it's when I leave here, I'm like, I got to go read about this now. I need to go learn a little bit more. I know
I can email you everything. I can email you some things, and I have like so many different things I can email, and so you could get a look at it. And I wasn't the only one that kind of like had some pullback on it, because we was like, wait a minute. And because of course I brought it up in class. I'm like, okay, so when was the study conducted and who were the participants? And I looked at it. I'm like, oh no, this has nothing to do with me. You know, so I immediately kind of felt like,
I mean, there is a lot of research out there about trauma, and there are a lot of programs that exist that are designed to address trauma. And one of the things that I think is really important to do with any program that is supposed to, I don't know, fix people, is to examine it the way that you have been, but examine it and understand what your core beliefs are when you're looking at it. Because sometimes there are things in there that do align with your core beliefs, and then there are things where you're like, no. And being able to tweeze out like what aligns with the core beliefs and what is rubbing up against it. Because the I have looked at so many different social emotional programs, so many programs that are supposed to reduce suspension rates and address discipline and behavior. And there are certain things that if the program doesn't allow for children's voices to be a part of the conversation, then it's like, nope, I don't care what you promise. Like this is a core belief that a child's voice has to be a part of the conversation. And so I think that is one thing when looking at whatever they're asking you to do, is seeing where it lines up against your core beliefs. And I don't think there is a perfect program. So, different people need different things. And there was something that you said that I think was really powerful when I think about programs. So you said it wasn't so much Shailly that made this week so powerful for you. It was the people that are gathered here. It is Shailly created the space, but it's really the participants that create the content of what is there. And I think what sometimes happens with programs is programs can create a space, but if they don't do the other part of it, then they're not really helpful. And so I think thinking about, is it that you need the space to be created so the work can be done to support the children and families who are going through trauma, or is it that there is some sort of a structure, there's something there that does align with what you believe? And so I think when we're in bureaucratic situations, we have to get creative with our language, because we are often forced to do certain things that you have to follow the institution's protocols. And so you get creative about, they want you to do X, and you use their language, but you do it in the way that lines up with your core beliefs. And so then you don't look like you're not adhering to the bureaucracy.
I would say, so this would be outside of the TRC model more so, and I would be more than happy to talk with anyone about ACE studies and about some different modalities that I myself have had to make adjustments for as a woman of color working with children of color, because a lot of the modalities in social work, which we talked about in my cohort in school, was really about these evidence-based practices that exist. These modalities are not researched or based on the community that it serves, but how do we adjust it and how do we create it and tweak it where we can still follow the fidelity of the model, but also address the needs of the community. So I can put my email out there as well. And there is a question. I'll just put my email on there.
Thank you so much, you guys. That was really helpful feedback, because I am one, especially when we're dealing with people's kids, being though that I don't practice social work, I'm just an advocate, you know, for the children and for to reduce trauma. So, you know, being though that I like to be careful, especially when we're talking about scientific based programs, and you know, just making sure that I'm transparent or letting these people know, hey, this was researched, you know, this study was done and this is how they came up with these models, and you know, just to you know, invite some people in, because some people, you know, they get very nervous when we start talking about trauma and mental health and mental wellness, you know. So just making sure. And it's so funny, I just got an email from them like right now. But thank you so much.
We have just a few minutes left. Ms. Morris, do you want to play that slideshow that you were trying to show yesterday to close this out? Or is there something else you think would be better right now?
I have a really fast question.
What?
I have a really fast question, because I feel very connected to everybody in this group as well. Is there any way that we could create like a group meet or something where we can all keep in touch? I know we're giving emails to
Yeah, that's exactly
facilitators.
the goal. That's exactly the goal. We're going to collect the emails and we will set up, and I can say this now, we're going to set up a meeting in like 2 weeks that will be like a circle, just sort of a follow-up to the training. We always do that. I think it is like kind of hard to walk out of this and like, what? Yeah, and I understand that. And so we're going to have a meeting in like 2 weeks. Tamara will sort of take leadership because she's working on program developing in Baton Rouge. We'll have a circle virtually. And we will fill each other in and what work we want to do. We'll keep the conversation going, obviously. Yes. Thank you for reminding me to say that. Ms. Morris, did you want to share that now or later, or?
Oh, whichever you want. I'm fine. I can share it now if everybody's okay. I think we have 2 minutes. Okay,
yeah, so what we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to watch a slideshow that we were supposed to watch yesterday, so we're going to watch it today with the song. But before we go, I just really thank you, Erica. I know you had a really intense week and month, so thank you for joining us, and it's always lovely to talk to Erica. And the rest of us are going to continue the training, and Erica, you're welcome to join us. We're having closing circle in 1 hour with the other link that allows those breakout rooms. And then at the end of that, you will go back to Red House there's a half an hour in there for you to go fill out whatever you have to fill out to get the certificate of completion, or if you're a lawyer, to get the CLE credits, or a social worker, get the credits. Okay, so after the slideshow, we'll just end the meeting and then we'll reconvene in 1 hour in the other link. Thank you, Erica. So grateful for your presence.